There are seasons when silence makes you wonder, when life feels heavier than it used to, when the prayers feel colder, the days feel longer, and heaven feels distant. And somewhere in that space between what you once felt and what you feel now, a quiet question begins to rise. Is he still the same God? You know, the one you used to trust without hesitation, back when your faith was simple and the presence of God felt near. When you didn't question his love every time the storm hit. When God is good wasn't something you forced out of your mouth, it was something you felt in your bones. But time does things, life hits. Disappointment reshapes you. Loss redraws your view of God. And before you realize it, you're not asking if he exists. You're asking if he's still trustworthy. You hear the words, God is faithful, God is near, God is unchanging. But in the cracks of your experience, it feels like something shifted. And it's tempting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he's not who he used to be. But what if the shift didn't happen in him? What if it happened in you? In the book of Malachi chapter 3 verse 6, God says, I the Lord do not change. He doesn't evolve. He doesn't forget. He doesn't drift. He is the same in the quiet as he was in the fire, the same in your sorrow as in your song. And if that's true, then maybe what you're feeling isn't abandonment. Maybe it's invitation. Maybe he hasn't moved at all, and he's waiting for you to remember what hasn't changed. Not his heart, not his presence, not his promises, and definitely not his love. The pain you're carrying didn't catch God by surprise. The season that shook you, the prayers that went unanswered, the doors that never opened, none of it altered who he is. Because God's identity isn't tied to your circumstances. His nature doesn't shift with your emotions. He was faithful before the storm, and he's still faithful in the middle of it. But let's be honest, that's hard to hold on to when your life doesn't look like your faith expected it to. When the healing didn't come. When the relationship didn't last. When the miracle didn't happen. You start to ask deeper questions, not just where is God, but why did he move like he used to? And behind that is an ache of fear. That maybe he's not who you thought he was. But faith isn't about God doing what you want. It's about knowing who he is, even when you don't understand what he's doing. Hebrews chapter 13 verse 8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. That's not a poetic phrase, it's a foundation. Because if he was worthy of trust then, he's still worthy now. Even if the path looks darker, even if your hands feel tired, even if you don't feel him like before. You're allowed to wrestle. You're allowed to ask the hard questions. But in the middle of all of it, hold on to this. His consistency is not based on your clarity. You don't need perfect vision to trust a perfect God. You just need to remember that his heart hasn't changed, even if yours is tired. He's not distant, he's not silent, he's not different. He's still the same God who called you, carried you, and covered you. And the quiet doesn't mean he left. It might just mean he's drawing you back to the stillness where your trust was first born. Sometimes the distance we feel from God isn't because he moved, but because we stopped leaning. We stopped depending. We replaced surrender with strategy, intimacy with routine, and trust with control. And in doing so, we drifted not into rebellion but into self-reliance. We didn't reject God, we just stopped waiting on him. And yet, even in that drift, he didn't change. He didn't withdraw his promises. He didn't unchoose you. The God who walked with you in your fire is the same one still whispering in your silence. He's not offended by your struggle. He's not shocked by your fatigue. He's still the God who knows how to restore what feels lost. In Isaiah chapter 46 verse 4, God says, Even to your old age and gray hairs I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. That promise isn't limited by season or age. It's a declaration of who he is, the God who carries, not just calls. The God who sustains, not just starts. The world will change. Your body will change. Your confidence, your emotions, even your perspective may shift. But he remains. His nature is not seasonal. His love isn't reactionary. His faithfulness isn't fragile. And because of that, you can breathe again, even in the in-between places. Trust doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like quiet endurance. Sometimes it's not a roar, it's a whisper that says, "I don't feel it, but I still believe." That's the kind of faith that pleases him, not because it's loud, but because it's anchored. You don't have to stir up a moment. You don't have to chase a feeling. You just need to remember the truth. He is the same. The same voice that spoke peace to your chaos then is still speaking now. The same arms that held you in the night haven't let go, and the same spirit that once filled you with fire is still able to breathe life into what feels cold. You can still trust him, not because you feel strong, but because he's never stopped being steady. One of the enemy's most subtle tactics isn't to convince you God isn't real, it's to convince you he's not the same anymore, that he changed when your prayers weren't answered, that he shifted when your plans fell apart, that he turned away when you needed him most. But lies don't have to be loud to be effective. They just have to make you question what you once knew was true. And the truth is, God doesn't need to prove himself all over again. He's already done more than enough. The cross wasn't just a moment of love, it was the final word on who he is. Faithful, steady, unmoving. The cross stands even when our confidence shakes. And that's why trust isn't about God repeating miracles. It's about us remembering the ones he already did. Psalm chapter 102 verse 27 says, "But you remain the same and your years will never end." It's not just that he doesn't change, it's that he can't. His character is anchored in eternity. There is no fatting in him, no mood swings, no inconsistency, only perfect, holy sameness yesterday, today, and forever. But let's be honest, we don't always feel that. Sometimes the silence feels louder than the promise. The delay feels deeper than the truth. And it's in those moments that trust becomes a decision, not an emotion. You don't trust God because everything makes sense. You trust him because he is who he says he is, even when you don't understand what he's doing. That kind of trust doesn't come from hype. It comes from history. You remember the times he came through, the nights he held you together, the moments you almost walked away, but couldn't because something in you knew he was still there. And he still is. You don't have to feel it to believe it. You don't have to see it to say yes. You just need to rest in the truth that the same God who started this story hasn't stopped writing it. There's something holy about remembering, not just what God has done, but who he's always been. Because in moments of fear, frustration, or silence, your memory becomes your weapon, not imagination, not feelings, just truth you've already seen. Think back to the time he made a way when you saw none, to the time peace came in a place where panic used to live, to the time you almost gave up, but somehow kept walking. That wasn't coincidence, that was consistency, his. The God who brought you through the last storm didn't change after it passed. The God who spoke clearly before didn't go silent as punishment. We change, our emotions shift, our focus drifts, but he stays. Lamentations chapter 3 verses 22 and 23 says, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." That means every sunrise is a fresh reminder, not of how strong you are, but of how steady he is. You may feel like you've lost something, fire, clarity, confidence, but God hasn't lost you, and he's not waiting for you to climb your way back into worthiness. He's just waiting for you to come honestly, to stop pretending you're fine, to admit you miss him. Because when truth meets surrender, trust is born again. Sometimes trust looks like silence, choosing to believe when nothing is changing. Sometimes it looks like returning, coming back even though you feel distant. And sometimes trust is just staying one more day when you feel like quitting. Not because you feel strong, but because you remember who he is. The world will tell you to move on. Your flesh will tell you to fix it. But grace whispers, "Remember me," because he hasn't left. He hasn't grown tired. He hasn't stopped being who he promised to be. You don't have to create something new. You just have to come back to what's always been true. You don't have to feel spiritual to be faithful. That's a lie religion taught us, that if we don't feel passion, we've lost our position. But faith has never been measured by feeling. Faith is measured by what you hold to when you feel nothing at all. The same God who welcomed your praise when your hands were raised still welcomes you when they're shaking. He doesn't value your emotional highs more than your quiet endurance. He sees the tears you don't let fall, the prayers you whisper in exhaustion, the trust you choose in the dark. And that trust means more to him than you know. 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 13 says, "If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself." That means his faithfulness isn't a reward for your performance, it's a reflection of who he is. He keeps being God even when you don't feel like much of anything. That's the safety of his character. Your weakness doesn't cancel his consistency. So stop trying to prove you believe. Just be honest. Say, "God, I'm still here, not because I feel you, but because I need you." And that's enough. That's always been enough. You're not behind, you're not disqualified, you're not forgotten. You're in the middle of learning how to trust a God who doesn't flinch when you're fragile. And in that process, you're becoming steady too. Because trust, real trust, takes root when everything else shakes. It's born in the valleys, confirmed in the silence, and refined in the wait. That kind of trust isn't flashy, but it's the kind that lasts. And right now, even if your voice is tired and your soul feels quiet, you're doing more than you realize. You're choosing to stay. And he sees that. The same God who walked with you through the fire hasn't stopped walking. Trust isn't always loud. Sometimes it's choosing to believe quietly when everything in you wants to walk away. It's opening your Bible not because you feel inspired, but because you know there's life in the words even when your heart is numb. It's lifting your eyes even when there are no answers. And in those moments, you're not being weak, you're being faithful. Because trust is built in tension between what you know and what you feel, between what God promised and what hasn't yet happened. That tension doesn't mean he's far. It means he's doing something deeper. He's not rushing your breakthrough. He's growing your roots. Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 9 says, "Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations." That kind of faithfulness isn't fragile. It's not seasonal. It doesn't expire when you doubt. It's woven into his identity. And that means you don't have to carry the weight of holding it all together. God isn't asking you to be strong enough. He's asking you to stay close enough. To walk with him, even when you don't understand the path. Sometimes, trusting God means walking when the emotion fades. Showing up when the spark is gone. Staying when it would be easier to shut down. Not because you're always confident, but because you know he hasn't changed. The same God who found you in your brokenness hasn't grown tired of you in your confusion. He hasn't lost interest. He hasn't stopped writing your story. And even if your trust feels small right now, that mustard seed is enough. Because his faithfulness doesn't depend on the size of your belief. It depends on the unchanging strength of his love. And that has never wavered. There's something powerful about realizing that God didn't change and he's still choosing to stay. Even after the moments you stopped believing, even after the nights you let go, even after the days you questioned everything, he stayed. Not because you held on, but because he did. And maybe that's what trust really is, not about never wavering, but about being willing to believe again, to return, to say, "God, I still want you," even if your voice trembles when you say it. Isaiah chapter 54 verse 10 says, "Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken." That's the kind of love you can build your life on. That's the kind of character you can trust, not because you always feel it, but because it never changes. He knows how the world has worn you down. He knows the people who left, the prayers that linger, the hope that flickers. And still, he's not asking you to pretend. He's asking you to be present, to meet him again right here as you are. You don't have to resurrect the old version of your faith. You just need to bring your current self to the unchanging God. Because the strength of your trust isn't in how steady you are, it's in how steady he is. Let go of the pressure to feel something grand. Let go of the idea that you need to earn your way back. The same grace that carried you before is still reaching for you now. The same presence that held you before the breaking is still close after the dust settles. And if all you can say today is, "I still believe you're good," that's enough. Because trust doesn't always look like certainty. Sometimes it looks like choosing to lean into love one more time. You're not watching this by chance. Maybe life has been heavy. Maybe faith has felt distant, but something in you still hopes. Maybe it's quiet. Maybe it's barely there, but it's real. And that hope, no matter how small, still matters to God. You don't have to feel strong to come close. You don't have to fix everything before you return. God's not asking for performance. He's inviting you back into trust, not blind trust, not forced trust. Real trust, the kind that says, "I've been hurt, but I believe you're still good." He hasn't changed. He hasn't walked away. He hasn't stopped seeing you. And he hasn't stopped holding what you thought you lost. The love, the fire, the nearness, it's not gone. It's just waiting to be revived. Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 7 says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him." Not in what they feel, not in what they see, but in who he is. That's the difference. You don't have to have answers. You just need to remember who's been steady all along. And if this message reminded you of something you used to feel, or showed you something you didn't know you needed, then don't just click away. Let this be more than a moment. Let it be a start. Subscribe not to a channel but to a deeper journey, a place where honesty is welcome and weakness isn't judged, a space for those still choosing to trust, even when it hurts, for people like you who still believe there's more. You're not too far, you're not too late, you're not alone, and no matter how much has changed, he hasn't. You can still trust him, because he's still the same God.